So the start of our story is Takahashi Nishiyama and Hiroshi Matsumoto, and they're planning that would end up being Street Fighter 1. Capcom is a great company that in their early days really proud themselves at making better versions of existing games. We even have interviews with them admitting so, and even making fun of other devs. That's not uncommon. Konami, Sega, and a lot of other companies were doing it too. I made your game 5 years later and it looks way better. And Street Fighter 1 has a lot of charm. This game made the genre have this absurdly high standard. But right after this, SNK decided to put an offer to Nishiyama that he couldn't refuse. Come to work for SNK and create your own dream project, the way you always wanted it. And with that, SNK didn't just secure Nishiyama, but his whole team. And that project became Fatal Fury. Fatal Fury looks really similar to Street Fighter 1. Some character tropes were really close to those drafted earlier at Capcom. Does Wajai looks like Adam? Conceptually, yes. Personality, kind of. Moveset? For sure. Nishiyama even admitted that on Street Fighter 1's intro, yeah, that was Terry Bogard. Hopefully he never comes back with that jacket. Oh my. I mean, of course the games are close to one another. They are from the same creators, the same team. In this process, we could say that it had the blessing to be a copy. Nishiyama said it himself. After looking on Street Fighter 2, if he was at Capcom, Street Fighter 2 would have looked like Fatal Fury with Ryu and Ken. That's it. Some years later, they would come up with Ryo Sakazaki from Art of Fighting. They inspired themselves in the original Ryu's abandoned design by Capcom from Street Fighter 1. Hopefully nobody has that same idea. And I want to talk about this a little bit. I don't even know why, but fans have some kind of resentment to this. In the history of fighting games, there are so many interesting and unexplored stories, as we will see today. But somehow we always stop to have a tour on this one. Don't forget to check out the souvenir store and the Clone machine ride. Okay, let me be mature about this one and discuss it in a way that YouTubers won't do it. Since Ryu came first, Capcom should have sued SNK and the original creators and shut down the whole project because it's an infringement on their copyrights. Do you really want to live in that world? I give you a look on what that world would look like. There is a famous story from Shozo Kaga. In 1990, he created the original Fire Emblem for Nintendo. Some drama behind the scenes happened and he left Nintendo to create his own company and make his own version of Fire Emblem called originally Emblem Saga. Nintendo was trying to say that even the menus on the game were copied, that basic mechanics were the same, but Kaga ultimately won. Nintendo sued him again and ended up winning because of him constantly hinting towards Fire Emblem. He kept using the old name in an advertisement. He even used a shape-shifting character from the old series to the new one. Watch this if you want. I love this guy, is so accurate with dates and everything. Well, Tear Ring Saga, I consider a mild success. Kaga would enter on a hiatus. He would later come back, but it's kind of tragic that somebody has such an incredible mind now got totally disassociated with his own creation. Even if Nintendo keeps using his characters for promotion and pointing towards his part of the series as the nostalgia and roots of the series. Even if Fire Emblem transformed into something else, his DNA is deeply rooted to a time where the series was mature and interesting. And you can see Kaga still loves this medium because this man is 77 years old and he is still working for the industry. Unk still got it. In terms of Tear Ring Saga, for people who loved his work, we would sit and just wonder what would have happened if he could consistently work on his vision. Nintendo never really waved the legal sword and justified, right? Just to halt a smaller developer. I can say that this would have been tragic if it happened to Takahashi Nishiyama, because I can confidently say that him and his team are responsible for probably the biggest pushes this genre ever seen. And even unrelated ones have a little of his hand in there. Let's ignore the fact that Capcom themselves knew they couldn't sue them because of the whole Fighters history case, where Capcom tried to say that this game was a clone from Street Fighter 2 and ended up losing because, again, you can't sue somebody because they created a karate fighter that doesn't quite move like Ryu. If that was the case, Irem would own Street Fighter 1 since Takahashi worked on Spartan X, a game that also have his inspiration all over it. So let's go back to Street Fighter 2. Incredibly popular game, a direct sequel to the original one, and now the new team left. Capcom, what is happening? Everybody is just leaving and tries to create their own Street Fighter with Blackjack and Chat's mom. Akira Nishitani left Capcom and created Eureka. You know, Street Fighter EX, Tetris Grandmaster, and of course their game fighting layer had some Street Fighter inspired characters. Ritsu is based on Ryu, but not Nishiyama's Ryu, but the unused Ryu sketch from Street Fighter 2. And let's not ignore the fact that Alan Schneider is based on Kenshiro from Hokuto no Ken. Yeah, you thought Chuck Norris, right? Which Street Fighter 2 Ryu is also based on, from his fight style to his ending. I wish somebody made a video about the I Got You King. Now, do they have a blessing to copy their own work, including the 4 kings? I mean, I'd say yes, blessed work for everybody. They had a process to create these characters. They didn't just got Ryu's animation from the earlier Street Fighter EX game or Bison or whatnot. These characters have decisions behind them to make them not only stand out differently, but to respond to a set of things that their game needed. For example, being a 3D game, we have these wave patterns in his Karate Ki. And going back to SNK until 99, Takahashi Nishiyama worked as a director for basically most of SNK fighting games. Fatal Fury, Art of Fighting, and KOF from 94 to 99. So from KO to K, these characters had at least his supervision. He left to create his own company called Dimps. This company would later bring on the Rumblefish, arguably a series that deserves way more of an impact than it did. I mean, my man doesn't miss. But to the surprise of everybody, I would say that this game has no Street Fighter ripoffs. Not in choreography, not in concept, not in philosophical design. Of course, they were trying to keep up the mantra from SNK of pushing everything to this art house status. Well, that's it. The stage is finally set for us to appreciate the drama. So SNK back in 98, they created a new portable console called Neo Geo Pocket, and they approached Capcom to have a crossover to attract people to this console. That deal created SNK vs Capcom, Fight of Millennium, and Fighters Clash on the original Neo Geo Pocket. We don't know exactly how the deal went, but it's some crazy deal since Capcom released 2 Capcom vs SNK fighting games, and somehow SNK was still on this deal, even post 2000, which the company went bankrupt because of the investment of fighting the Game Boy. The last game in the series was in 2006 with DS SNK vs Capcom Card Clash. At that time, SNK had changed ownership like 3 times. After CVS 2, Capcom was preparing for Capcom vs SNK 3. And this time the game would have been a 3D game. But then since SNK exploded, they cancelled that game and reused the assets of it to create another unreleased game called Capcom Fighting All-Stars. Some defectors from SNK joined, like for example its director, Tanabe, which got an interview and even spilled the beans about this game. Well, we got to this point. Ingrid, a character that was created for this game, being the only character that survived out of all newcomers that came from this game. And according to the ancient history, Capcom devs from 2003 liked this character so much that they decided to make a sprite of her for Capcom Fighting Jam, the first under the leadership from Ono. Remember, it's thanks to this Blanca lover that Capcom's fighting division even exists to this day, and this game was the first built out of it. And this character sparked some controversy. You either didn't know she existed, or you hated her when she was put on Alpha 3 Max. And there is a compelling argument to why this hate came about. One being that she destroyed Street Fighter's story, and the rebuttal was, it's a mistranslation that nobody knew about. I mean, did you know that the back of the box for a lot of Capcom's games, since it was localized from Capcom of America, their games had a lot of typos. We make fun of this all the time. So while making this video, I just realized there is a typo on the trailer. But at the same time, remember, modern fighting game people are allergic to actual passion for something. So any argument that would stem from a perspective that actually respects the integrity of a story, it doesn't matter how silly it is, will be met with ridicularization. And of course, if you want a story, go read a book. But at the same time, the characters that people are most attached are the characters that actually have some depth to their story. And ironically, when this lore progresses, everybody commemorates like it's 4th of July. Actually, you know what I want? An inferior product. Please don't even try to get close to a multifaceted product. You know what? That cell phone should only make calls. Don't worry about music and video. calls. It's crazy for me to even talk about integrity of story in a medium with a bunch of people complaining about the last of man killing the man on the second game. And Street Fighter's story was perceived in a different way than in current times. People would wonder and create theories about where this story was going. Is Ryu Akuma's son, you know? And second, of course, she doesn't fit Street Fighter. And that actually makes sense, if I'm being honest. Ingrid being an asset flip from SNK characters. Predominantly Kula and Athena, both their fighting iterations were created on the King of Fighters. You know, just to be sure, people think Terry is from KOF. Street Fighter has a really rudimentary approach to the design of their characters. The idea that Street Fighter is about martial artists is something that I bring a lot on my channel. So they will always be tensed up, battle ready, especially at the time. Capcom made sure to solidify in our minds that there was no space for personality in this character's fighting style. But at the same time, the moment that the fight ended, the characters became the most expressive and iconic characters there are. The two don't mix. Fighting, take it serious, raise those fists. Okay, it's over, you're off, dance all you want. And what's even crazy is that characters that are supposed to rile up the crowd originally didn't even do that. Here's your one frame of personality. Go on. Where SNK, remember the original creators, right? So let's say a gap in the market. Their characters are too expressive of their personality, sometimes all the time. Instead of selling you on a roughly accurate martial art, KOF would make characters' interests be part of their martial art. Their personality would play a part on how the character perceived fighting on itself. When a character executes a move incorrectly, it's not a demonstration of how inexperienced they are with the martial art, but rather how did they come up with this moveset that expresses himself. Character walk animations, instead of being the most effective battle ready movement, they just do their thing. Look at how expressive this looks. It tells you a lot about the character without even reading their lore. Look at this character. He's so strong he doesn't even give a crap. He just turns his back for his opponent. Let me show you my favorite walk back animation of all time. This character is a psycho, man. Guess what? Itsuno, creator of School Rivals, actually said that on an interview. This move from SNK was so influential that made Capcom seek those philosophies of appealing to the youth and trying to give a small personality to their characters on Street Fighter Alpha. Him being probably the biggest SNK fan at Capcom. What, Capcom fan? Are you afraid of some soul? And that transpired to leak to their characters too. Thank God Itsuno and his team, okay? Let's compare two characters that people say don't fit the franchise. How does Fei Long not fit Street Fighter? Characters that are referenced directly to a real martial artist is not alien to the franchise. He moves himself accordingly to Bruce Lee's perceived kung fu. Some of his moves are straight out of the movie box. On that, I won't get to the controversy, but to what people thought it was 100% real at the time. So Fei Long is a by-the-book play for Nishitani and company. Meanwhile, a character that doesn't even raise her hands when she's fighting. She has this sweet-looking walk that seems distracted about the fight. When she does a move, it's not even the most efficient body movement. She's posing, expressing herself on special moves. She even does some flippity-dippities on a half circle back. Does she even like ice skating? Oh, ice skating girl. Ice skating. Kyo likes ice hockey. Wait, what? I don't even know. But you don't understand. She's a goddess. Of course, she has so much power. And Gil's still ready to square off? Hello? Resurrects. Bring the apocalypse. Throws a meteor? Hello? Yes, she doesn't feel like a Street Fighter character because she has too much of a soul. If we come to the consensus that that's exactly why Capcom got attached to her, we kinda understand that they weren't producing this level of character at Capcom. I know Ingrid players are eager to play her for the first time ever, but people may like this character because she has a lot of personality by just existing. And this story doesn't end here. That's what I kinda love about this. It wasn't really anybody in particular on SNK that was producing this character. Even if you say that 2000s SNK were working on this character, which could explain the Kula influence. Athena is a character from 94, the King of Fighters. You can't ignore the fact that this character is an asset flip. I, for once, know this and am indifferent for this character. But in a world where artists are coming up out of the woodwork to tell us about the integrity of the work since AI will come and sweep all their jobs, they sit down and explain about the decision making behind the brush that makes the paint or art to come alive. It's difficult to stand behind a character that is basically a repurpose of functions from SNK characters. For example, she's not even into ice skate, or Capcom didn't even think to mention it because the move was not thought out for this character. Just like AI doesn't have a will to make a decision when she is compiling and regurgitating art from real artists, Ingrid doesn't express her personality, ideals, and interests through her fighting style, but rather regurgitates whatever they had at Capcom vs SNK 3. Now that's where the story starts to get interesting, believe me, because if you are a fighting game obsessed guy, after Eureka, Street Fighter 2 with Nishitani started working on Street Fighter 4, it wasn't working apparently because Capcom was looking for pixel perfect precision in 2.5D. But that Dimps company that made the Street Fighter 1 would be escalated as a crew to work for Capcom. On their next entry for that series on Street Fighter 4, let me explain. Street Fighter 4 is a sad game, especially if you compare to the Rumblefish. Remember before the revisionist history where Street Fighter 3 was a wild and popular game for years, people didn't even know these cool characters existed? Well, Street Fighter 4 would base itself on the most popular game in the series, Street Fighter 2, a callback to its origin, so meaning that get that old book with the anatomy by Bengus and boil everything down to martial artists. This is a big mark in this series. This is really important. Takahashi Nishiyama and his team at this time already innovated the genre. Their philosophy was different, always pushing forward on what is possible to do with these characters in terms of personality, animation, design, you name it. But now Capcom is putting a muzzle on one of the most creative teams on fighting game history to create these characters in a philosophy that wasn't theirs to begin with. But let's ignore that and say that Street Fighter 1 was that philosophy. You are asking for a man and a team to basically go back 19 years in the past to this rudimentary and limiting design philosophy. And like Heracles said, time is like a river. You cannot touch the water twice. There's a whole video that I would recommend to you in KOF fashion. In that video, I talk about the mistreatment of the white traditional karate gi. Summarizing, Gorodaemon was the best representation of those old martial artists. He is the closest comparison we have to Ryu, isolating himself on the mountains, training to achieve the perfect state for his martial art, which was judo. But he would be outbested by the youth, being the third strongest character, because SNK was trying to appeal to these younger audiences that would love to be represented as they are and not as a fighter from 20 years ago. So Kyo doesn't even train at all. He's just naturally gifted. This could be considered a continuation to this story because Dimps are not using new and fresh ideas like Rumblefish to push forward the medium. In a melancholic way, Abel represents exactly that. Abel was a sambo fighter from France, but the truth is, we saw this character already. Originally, his concept design, Abel, was supposed to be a small boy judo fighter, mistakenly easily by a girl. Wait, that's the Strip Fighter's design. Oh god. A character that conditions you with standing kick, run up, grab, ambiguous roll, left right, time to gas, anti-air, down forward, juggle point, roll, air grab, side switch, ambiguous roll again. Thinking about it, he doesn't really use combat sambo at all if you know the moves. Think for a second about Abel's story. A guy that has amnesia, forgot about his past, and became a soulless puppet for an evil organization. He doesn't recognize himself, but the only thing left from his old self is his fighting style. He's the most stoic character, doesn't express emotions with a monotone talk. Just a genetic to be mass-produced, or a design to be mass-produced. And people say he's the protagonist of the game, so you wonder why they decided to bring back this character to this mess. You asked them for a martial artist, they gave you a martial artist. This was an identity crisis of Street Fighter, because we gotta avoid everything that Third Strike stands for, because that didn't sold well. With that, rendering Street Fighter visual code as this. The other character, of course, Kim Kapuan, justice, kind-hearted, redemption, transformed into twisted, masochistic, heartless Juri. But question, do they have the blessing? Of course, the same company. But it's kinda sad to see people that are capable of creating peak being limited this way. Street Fighter 1 and Fatal Fury were not known by its goofy personifications of characters. Actually, characters are really played straight and serious in games and story created by Takahashi. But Erika, in the other hand, Street Fighter 2 is really jokey with its design. I really think the argument for Juri's costume was, no, you guys actually did a JoJo reference, so we gotta do it too. Hence why I kinda don't enjoy these characters as much as I should've. With the rare exception, because when you know their work, you expect them to push the limits instead of doing more of the same. Characters don't feel new if they are not really new experiences, especially if you are obsessed like me and feel like there is this progression history of choreography and designs in fighting games. People in this industry should at least ought to not only comprehend this story, but achieve to adding up instead of being just a filler episode in it. And yeah, even indies that blindly follow their own trail. Me at that moment, I was really looking for Street Fighter 6 in 2008. That's the truth. Characters that don't move like anything else that came before it. A new entire interpretation of these martial arts choreography and actually being iconic on its own merit. When I say the best newcomers since Street Fighter 3, I mean it. And I think this relationship from Capcom with Dimps would get it to an attrition point in Street Fighter 5. Do you remember Season 2 of Street Fighter 5? A sad day for the Left Behind edition. And I want you to imagine yourself in these developers' shoes for half of the roster is reimagining characters from the 90s. You are in a big company now. It's time for you to shine and create ideas, but you've been recreating someone else's work for years now. Let's totally ignore that the last newcomer, ignoring the Capra from Street Fighter 4, were the original newcomers of Street Fighter 4. And the rest of the roster was filled with, here's the old characters you guys love, but right after that, let's do a Street Fighter Cross Tekken. Here's 50 characters that already exist in another company translated to 2.5D and Fat Mega Man. Some of the new characters that were introduced in SF5 in a specific thing is still working with the philosophy of creating a jokey character, and that kind of delegitimized the 4 emperors and even Bison's cartel. What is even going on in this space? Who contracted these people? So firstly, you fell in love with a design because it has a lot of personality, and then you get the people that work with that design choice and you make this? Laura really seemed like the last character they created in this whole bunch, since her story doesn't lead to anything. Her setup of feeling the Setsui no Haro doesn't lead anywhere. The character has no presence on the storyline of her debut game. Nakali is actually a jobber that keeps talking nonsense, and it's sad. I hope when they reboot this series, they bring him back like Kodokan of Street Fighter. Rashido! I still don't like his quirky personality trait. But not only that, but if it wasn't for Harada and Tekken, this character wouldn't even exist. But okay, go forward to the next game and rob some people. The burnout must be crazy. There's no ownership for your work. But listen, now we get to the season 2 and the game didn't sold well. So here's $5, a bucket of KFC, and a clip to create the newcomers that we promised. And by the way, you guys gotta try to redefine what Street Fighter visual code is, like you promised, to prove that we have a good concept for the future. Or y'all are fired. Bye. The concepts that came from Street Fighter 5 Season 2 were really terrible. They are not well thought out at all. Listen to me, the company that created some of the best successors in fighting game history, they somehow dropped the ball on what I consider the best layup in fighting game history. How did Balrog grow his son to be a... And you can see that the pedigree that I was talking about is there. The first thing people talked about Minot, it was her walk animation. Doesn't that expresses a lot about her still something SNK Takahashi Nishiyama? The all new fighters was not even true. G was supposed to be Q, so they were kind of working with a framework. Colin didn't have a fighting style, but her body was set. S. Abigail is also a character that already had a visual. Zeku, Ninja Man, we knew what he was going to do, okay? New character. And Minot, Sniper Girl. And the moment we leave Season 2, where the characters were introduced, with a pretty standard in-game trailers. Now, here's your favorite characters coming back. Here's a whole cinematic. That's not fair. With that, I gotta end it to Street Fighter 6. Dimps was dropped like a bad habit, and they decided to do an in-house Capcom fighting game. A proper budget to the game. The characters look cool, their moves are pristine, they played their cards right this time, putting the World Warriors from the start of the game. Thus it still bothers me that they forced the characters to their martial art uniform as their default. Yes, even if you can see that their second outfit normally speaks way more to their interests and personality. Wait, they gave us both? Nice. Correlating characters with their jobs, interests produce great results always. Funny needle finger girl, that would be a great way to solve. Works with fashion, also fights, pretty convenient. So in my opinion now, Street Fighter 6, Ingrid fits pretty well. I just hope they do something about the rest. And at least for me, for people that hate her, to me it's actually good that a character brings any emotion out of her. I prefer a character being memorable because everybody hates the character than a character not being memorable at all. Is it now that I say that her design looks like Princess Luna from Kasharn? Into plagiarism in fighting games, I want to leave this message. Even though it wasn't technically for the most part, people like to quote something that goes like this: if you were inspired by something, take it, copy it, plagiarize it. Don't try to hide it. Your influences are also part of who you are. I prefer the version that I learned at school. So anthropophagy unites us socially, economically, and philosophically. This is a metaphor for you to be a cannibal of cultures. Digest, absorb, and transform rather than imitate it, creating something that is distinctively yours because you take ownership of anything you do. Because even if you plagiarize it, the thing that you choose to copy also declares something about you. So who cares if Kojima stole some stuff? Delete Luke from the game and subscribe. I talk about a bunch of stuff, but choreography, design philosophy is something that I think I will always come back to. Bye.